So today I want to talk about the creative spirit. To me, the creative spirit it's part of my daily life. It is something that I am constantly inviting in, and it flows through me. But I've worked at that. I've worked really hard at that over my lifetime. And um the fact is that everyone is creative, and people don't think that they're creative. They think that only artists are creative. But it's not true. Everyone is creative. If you are human, you are creative. And um, creativity is just how we're designed. We are designed to create. This is something that other species can't do necessarily. It's something that we have control over, to use creativity to design our lives. And I'm looking down at my notes, which are in my sketchbook, which I will also talk about. So if you are, like, whatever you do, whether it's being a homemaker and cleaning your house, whether it's cooking, whether it is organizing your toolbox, or how you do your work, whatever it is that you do in your job, you do it creatively. And I think that people just don't use the word creativity when it comes to the things that they do every day that are actually creative. Creativity it's something that we're not only designed to do, but it's something that we can actually kind of control, which I know sounds really weird because often students, especially students, they would be like, "Oh, I'm the most creative at 2 o'clock in the morning the night before the project's due." And I would always be like, no, that's not true. It is just not true. When we open up to the creative spirit and we use brainstorming tools and things that can help us to be more creative and to open it up more, we're actually going beyond our initial thoughts, our initial design. And what you would end up getting after working 2 o'clock in the morning the day before the project would always be stuff that was just okay. It was passable, it was doable often, but it wasn't super creative. It wasn't clever. It didn't have design work that goes with actual planning, of the creative process. And so, there are these things called thumbnail sketches that we do in advertising and design. And these little sketches, like, I would assign 80 sketches to my students for a project, and they would be like, what? They couldn't understand it. But the fact is that the first 50 are typical. They're things that everyone else is going to come up with. Headline, picture, body copy, logo. Very boring, very again, it works often. It's design A, layout A, but it's not placed diagonally, or the headline is not as creative as it could be, or the imagery isn't what it could be. When you go deeper, you get the best results. And in my career, I had to be creative 40 plus hours a week. And so I had to learn how to do that. And part of doing that was, in the brainstorming process, it's really the creative process. You could call it the design process. It's actually modeled after the scientific process, where first you analyze and do research. There are a few steps. You analyze and do research. Then you brainstorm. So you take all that research that you did, the looking up things like what industry is this project for, and it could be anything. It could be designing a bathroom. It could be any project that you have. It could be a speaking engagement or a video. Whatever it is, you use the creative process for it. So you do research. What have other people done in the past? What is trending now? What are some good colors to use? What does the client like? What does the client want? What do they expect? All of that needs to be done first. And then you take that information and you go through a brainstorming process. And that's the second step, is actually brainstorming and ideation, where you go, okay, now I have all this information. I know that I have to do this project. Okay, where can I take it? Where can it go from here? What can it look like? And in that process, you actually, I believe the creative spirit flows the most in that brainstorming and ideation process, or portion of the design process or the creative process. The next step is to actually implement and design whatever it is that you came up with. Whatever your ideas were, you implement those ideas, you produce them, you do them. And I think I'm missing a step here. This is my brain, which is fine. It's okay. So you create what you're doing, you design it, create it, or produce it, I should say. And then after you end up producing it, you always, the last step is always to look back at it and go, okay, did that work? You have to analyze it and really take a look at it from the perspective of what was the project for? What was I doing it for? Did I answer all those questions? Did I solve the problem, which is a creative problem? Did I solve that problem? And did I do it well? And so I think that is a portion that sometimes people don't like to do, because it's critique. It's doing the work of looking at it and going, okay, I did this, so how did I do? And that can be challenging for people. I have been in critique sessions where many times someone quits their job because they get so upset about it, or they get fired because of the way that they're acting in the critique session. I've experienced a lot of things, because emotions run really high when it comes to critique. We like to do the work, but we don't like people to necessarily tell us, whether we did a good job or not. Or we're just looking for that. We're looking for, did I do a good job? And we're not open to constructive criticism, which is an oxymoron, right? But we do need that input. We need the feedback if we're going to improve for the next time. And so that is something that I always looked for in employees when I was leading is, does this person take feedback? Are they willing to take feedback? And how does that look? Can we partner with solutions? So that's very important. So as far as the creative spirit and everyone being creative, I used to do these things wherever I worked. I actually did some version or variation of them, but I call them creative sessions. And way back in the day, I would do these, and they'd be like an hour a month, and everybody in the company had to come, from the receptionist to the sales staff to the president of the company to the owner. Everybody came, and we would do things like dance the hokey pokey, and then learn how to draw elephants, and we would just do creative things, fun things. And it sounds weird, right, to actually do that at a workplace. It's like, what's the point? And what's the point of inviting everybody? But what ends up happening is that you do embarrassing things in front of people that you work with. And when you allow yourself to be vulnerable, you actually end up bonding with people in those embarrassing moments. And so we were able to actually track the increase in productivity after we started doing creative sessions. Because when a deadline would come and we'd have to get an ad on an airplane for an insertion in a publication, like everybody would team up and just get it done. And, you can't buy that. It's very valuable to be able to do that. And I know that it's really, and thank goodness that lately it's become important to do team building and organizational and employee development, which I have always loved, because again, it's like, why are you there? You're there for a service, for a reason, for your clients. And if you're not being effective in your job or as a team, then what's the point? Then you're just skating by. And I believe that we're not made to just skate by. That we can contribute more than just doing just doing every day. So the creative spirit is also, it's inspired, the creative spirit comes and you begin to get ideas that you didn't have before. You begin to plan things in a different way. And there are tools to do that. There are ways to do that. So one way to do that is that I always, first of all, I love my pens, but I always have a sketchbook with me. Always have a sketchbook with me. They started out with comp books because the blank white paper of a sketchbook was just so intimidating to me at the beginning, and I didn't want to ruin it. Now my sketchbooks are big and they're full of information, and I don't just use them for drawing. I use them for mind maps, for brainstorming and planning. And then I combine it with my emotional state, and so, again, a part of being creative hours and hours and hours a week is that you have to get stress off your mind. You have to lay down your worries for a little while, just long enough to get the work done. And so to do that, I would use my sketchbook, and, I could be writing like, oh, my boss was just a jerk. I can't believe this just happened. My client, whatever. And I just spend, 30 seconds writing down that information. And the beauty is that then you can just close the book and push it aside and get on with what you need to do with your actual work, your creative work. So I have these sketches here. I have mind maps, which I'd like to talk about a little bit. Mind maps are problem solving tools that I love. It's something I have fallen into that I create, and I'll put pictures of mind maps up here so you can see what that looks like. But you start with your topic, and it could be anything that you have to solve, anything that you have to do, whether it's planning your garden or what you're going to make for dinner for the week. It could be anything that you need to design, basically. And you put the topic in a little circle in the center, and then from there you draw in a very non-linear way, because mind maps are non-linear. When we think in a linear fashion, A, B, C, 1, 2, 3, we're forcing ourselves to go, okay, what's step 1? What's step 2? What's step 3? And that actually blocks, it limits us, it limits our creativity. And so to do a mind map is it's great because you can start thinking about one portion of the topic, and then you can move to another portion, and then another, and then go back to where you were in the first place, and you can draw lines connecting things, and it becomes an amazing sort of brain dump of information. And what I like to do is when I'm done with my mind map, I then add little numbers and I go, okay, this needs to be dealt with first, this is second, this is third, etc. And then if you put those in order, you have an outline, you have your plan, you have what you're going to talk about or what you're going to write about, and or how you're going to design something, steps. You just put it in order. And again, you have more information because you did it in a nonlinear fashion. And so again, I'll put examples up. I have tons. That's what I do. I do mind maps all the time. So something else that I wanted to talk about is the fact that, I said that everyone's creative, and you're creative at whatever it is that you do. And, I think that the language is just something that needs to change. And, because again, whether I'm cooking or, whatever it is I'm doing it creatively. I'm, and the creative spirit, when the creative spirit comes, like time disappears, and you find yourself a little while later sort of waking up to the world and going, oh gosh, what just happened? I just spent 4 hours sewing, or whatever it is. And it's that in those moments, that we are being most like how God created us. So I don't, again, I don't know if you have a relationship with God or anything spiritual like that, but if you're human, you're creative, and you're doing creative things in creative ways. And we're inspired. The human spirit, the creative spirit, is just waiting, for that story to come, or that project idea to come. But the thing is that we have to be open to it when we're in, because we become what we think, right? We reap the seeds that we sow. And if we're negative, or, we have a bad attitude or bad, mindset, or we're acting with bad behaviors, all of those things block creativity. They block lots of things. We have to be positive, and we have to affirm our lives. And I use mind maps. I use creativity to plan my life. I really do. When I think of what are my goals, I take a mind map, take a piece of paper, and I draw that circle, and I say, 2026 goals, and I start writing down what it is that I want to accomplish. And, for me, writing it down makes it real, and so, thoughts are sort of in the ether somewhere. I don't know. Thoughts are fleeting at times. But if I write it down and I take a good look at it and I start to do some planning about it and some brainstorming about it, then it starts to become real. And I want my life, even though I'm sick, even though I'm dealing with all of this crazy pain and all of these challenges, I want my life to actually mean something, And so, which brings me, again, I'm looking at my notes here, but it brings me to dreaming and using our imagination. Again, going back to positive and negative, we can use our imagination for positive fantasy and ideas, or we can use it negatively. An example of negative fantasy is pornography. Something that people get into that is unrealistic often, and it's fantasizing about something that isn't the reality of the world. It's not reality in your life. And so there are lots of things that people do in fantasizing negatively. Here's another example. When we have to have a conversation with somebody, maybe an authority figure, and we play that conversation in our head as though it is happening, and we do it negatively. We expect that the person is going to react a certain way or say a certain thing, and that's fantasy. That's using your imagination. And so again, it can be destructive. And the Bible says that we're supposed to take our thoughts captive and renew our minds. Two different places in the Bible, but there are, like, the occult, new age, things like that. Like, they live off of affirmations, and affirmations can work. But you're only doing it in your own power, and your own power is limited. When you connect with God, you connect with his power, and your dreaming, your imagination, the things that you positively think about will happen in a positive way. But you have to be responsible and understand that subconsciously and consciously, your mind is becoming who you're going to be tomorrow. Like, you have to take responsibility for that, and think positively. Let's see. Like, there's so many things that I wanted to talk about, but I think I'm going to set this aside, and just sort of listen for a moment. So, creative spirit, you've got it. You are creative. No matter who you are creative. And, my hope is that you will start to look at the things that you do on a daily basis and start to see the creativity in those things, because you are doing it already. And you can increase it. And that is so amazing that we can do that, and that we can create things that we never thought of doing before. So I have written a couple of books on creativity, and they're really fun. I enjoy them. Art Supplies for the Mind. I think Hardwired for Creativity is the title of the book. The subhead is Art Supplies for the Mind. And that book is actually something that takes you through not art supplies in terms of like how you use a brush or how you mix paint, but they're for the mind. So it's things like time management and how to communicate with clients and how to be a part of a team and all of those other things that we need in order to be successful as creative people, as artists, and as everybody. So yeah, and then there's a 2-book series called You Are Creative, which is really fun because the first one is called The Truth About Being Human. And so it's a lot of what I talked about today. And then the second book is Increase Your Creative Intelligence. And the Lord actually gave me an assessment that you can take. And so that book has that assessment in it, and you can see your sort of where you're at with your creative intelligence. So that's fun. I had fun creating those books. So yeah, again, if you got this far, great. Thank you so much. And shoot, if you have any ideas for topics, things you'd like to talk about, know about, whatever, put them down in the comments and I will take a look. And I'll see you on the next one.